Live.
Okay. My screen's stuck. The Durham District School Board acknowledges that many Indigenous nations have long-standing relationships, both historic and modern, with the territories upon which our school board and schools are located. Today, this area is home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island. We acknowledge that the Durham region forms a part of the traditional and treaty territory of the Mississaugas of Squamish Island First Nation, the Mississauga peoples in the treaty territory of the Chippewas of Georgina Island First Nation. It is on these ancestral and treaty lands that we teach, learn, and live. The Durham District School Board is committed to learning environments that are safe, welcoming, respectful, equitable, accessible, inclusive, and free from discrimination while placing human rights and equity at the center. The Durham District School Board recognizes Indigenous rights are distinct. In the exercise of those rights, Indigenous staff and students shall not be subjected to actions with the aim or effect of depriving these distinct rights. So welcome to our Parent Involvement Committee tonight. We have our agenda before us. We have a presentation from two guests. Well, one is a guest, one's a member of our committee, Jill Harvey and James Kudnicki. And then we have a report from our school cache, which will be given by Ted Foster. And then we have updates from our subcommittees. And then just a brief information about the parent-friendly version of the human rights draft human rights policy. And then we're going to talk about updating the SEC handbook, updating the video, and then we'll talk about our year-end report, and then that will be our meeting for tonight. So thank you so much for coming and for participating in our session tonight. At this time, if we could have the approval for our agenda.
I'll move to approve, Margaret.
Thank you. And a second?
I'm happy to second.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay. So tonight we have a very special presentation to be given to us by Jill Harvey and James Kudnicki. They are part of one of our committees that work with our 2S LGBTQI community in our board. And so they're going to now be presenting us some information about Visible Every Day and what it means for us as a committee and how we can help to ensure that all of our children are affirmed, valued, and recognized. So I'm going to turn it over to Jill. So I'm going to stop sharing, and then Jill and James will share their screen.
Great, thank you, Margaret. I think, James, you're going to share your screen, correct?
Correct, should be coming up momentarily.
Wonderful. Okay. Well, while James is doing that, I'll just introduce myself. As Margaret said, my name is Jill Harvey. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the grade 3-4 vice principal for DDSB at home this year. And as Margaret also said, I am currently interim co-chair of the Visible Everyday Committee along with James. And I just want to first of all thank you for inviting me here to this evening to speak with James about the importance of creating inclusive and identity safe spaces for all our DDSB families and students, a safe space to engage with and have a voice in their child's education. We have been asked specifically to address ways in which we can increase the voice of our 2S LGBTQIA+ families. And I just wanted to mention that taking a trauma-informed approach, we will be discussing some topics today that require significant amounts of mental and emotional energy for those individuals who do identify as members of the 2S LGBTQIA+ community. And as such, I'd just like to preface our time here by acknowledging the difficult and complex nature of these conversations and encourage anyone who feels mentally or emotionally vulnerable at any point to take the space that you need. And with that, thanks again for having me this evening, and I'm going to pass it over to James.
Fantastic. Thanks, Jill. And yes, my name is James Klodnicki. My pronouns are he, him, his. My position is I'm the constantly proud principal of Donnelly Wilson Secondary School, as well as being the proud interim co-chair of Visible Every Day. And part of what we're going to be talking about today is the understanding of our own power and our own positionality. I myself, I'm very aware that I'm a white cisgender heterosexual male who is striving to be the best possible ally and the best possible co-conspirator and advocate for the 2S LGBTQIA+ community in the power and in the position that I have. Through my position, I'm very aware of my and of our work as duty bearers within human rights, which the PIC has had presentations from Devika Mathur in the past few meetings. We are also working through the Visible Everyday Committee through the concept of not about us, without us. So we want to gather further parent, guardian, caregiver voice from those parents, guardians, and caregivers who are part of the 2S LGBTQIA+ community. But we will be speaking to tonight as well where that voice is. Extensive research, as you will probably know, confirms that student achievement and well-being are enhanced when families and members of the broader school community are engaged in their children's learning at home and at school. Our work as administrators and leaders and parents and guardians and caregivers within the system and within the Visible Everyday Committee is to engage families and gather their voice towards creating schools and school systems that are accessible, responsive, and safe for all. I do need to share, though, as well, in regards to why I am doing this presentation and why I am so lucky to be part of this committee. This is very much a passion project for me. As an arts educator, excuse me, I have spent absolute decades supporting my students who have felt safe enough in my classrooms, my department learning environments, and my performance spaces to be their true and authentic selves. I also have a very personal connection to the 2S LGBTQIA+ community, as my eldest is currently transitioning. So I'm living not only the administrator and the leader role within the system, but also the parental role of supporting the child that I love as they not only undertake this transition at school, but this transition into their own life and into their place in our world.
Thank you, James. So we do have several talking points for this evening, and we recognize we do have a limited time, but we want to ensure that we do take some time to provide context for our conversations and share some of the important work that's been done, not only across, across the system, across DDSB, and particularly within the Visible Everyday Committee. So we really hope that this evening is the start of a collective learning journey for everybody here. And some of the talking points that we have, you can see on screen there. We're going to address briefly cis heteronormativity, and if that's a word you're not familiar with, don't worry, we'll be talking about that, and then share some key messages from our work. We'll be looking specifically at some parent, caregiver, guardian voice, and then going a little deeper into the Visible Everyday recommendations. And then looking specifically at how we can create inclusive and identity safe spaces through a framework which we've called Connect, Engage, and Sustain. So they're the key talking points. So if James, you don't mind just going to the next slide, I can start with the first one. Thank you. So as I said, I feel it's really important to begin by addressing cis normativity and heteronormativity to provide context for our work. So what are those words? Well, you can see yourself on the screen. You can read the definitions, but basically cis heteronormativity, it refers to a society and all of the structures therein that privilege cisgender heterosexual individuals. And it's also the assumption that all people are heterosexual and cisgender by default. And it's conditioned us to think that men are masculine and women are feminine, men like women and women like men. And anyone who doesn't fit within that criteria is placed where society thinks it makes most sense. And while recent years have seen a societal shift, there really still remains a lot of work to be done and precedents to be set. In a heteronormative society, people whose identity is outside of the binary tend to have to explain or renounce their sexual orientation or gender identity. And that concept not only creates a hierarchical exclusivity, but it's also harmful and very invasive. And we need to acknowledge that and recognize that people shouldn't ever have to explain why they're with their chosen partner or why they identify as a certain gender. And also remembering on the flip side, they shouldn't have to hide their sexual orientation or gender identity either to keep themselves safe. James alluded to research a few moments ago, and research does suggest that schools are by default highly heteronormative cultures. And we have members in all our stakeholder groups across the DDSB who view the world through a heterosexual, heteronormative lens, and therefore may not be aware of some of the challenges that do face our 2S LGBTQIA+ community, students, families, caregivers. And it's important to recognize and understand this dynamic and to actively make change. So through the voices of our 2S LGBTQIA+ parents, guardians, and caregivers, we can really learn a lot about the steps that we need to take in order to create more inclusive school communities. And I just want to add there, I am by no means here tonight as an expert in any of this. I am a co-learner along with James. I am a strong ally and a strong advocate. I'm a conduit for many voices. I'm not the go-to expert, and I just wanted to put that out there too. So yeah, James, if you don't mind, you're it. Actually, tag, you're it.
Thanks, Jill, and well said. This is all about learning, and to quote Maya Angelou, when you until you know better, do the best you possibly can, and when you know better, do better. And so that's what the ongoing learning is about. Along with the list of talking points that Jill highlighted earlier, we wanted to highlight a couple of key messages, which we find as administrators and educators and leaders and parents and guardians and caregivers, we have been repeating in support of the 2S LGBTQIA+ community. So the first being provide a safe space for everyone. As an administrator, as a teacher, as a staff member of a school, when a safe space is provided, then learning and unlearning can occur. Ours is not the job to out anyone. Again, in our work as educators, administrators, allies, and teachers, our work is the job to support and to be aware of how our actions impact members of the 2S LGBTQIA+ community, our actions and our inactions. And just to tell a quick story, I was lucky enough to be helping out with the Pride Prom that happened at the Jubilee Pavilion on Friday. And the students who participated in that, we were very aware that we cannot assume, even though they were participating in the event, that their families were aware of the fact that they are part of it. So transportation home from the event does not mean an automatic call to a parent or a guardian, because again, that would be outing that student. And that's not our job at all. The third point, take the lead of the family. So undertaking in this way, by taking the lead of the family to secure the privacy and confidentiality of the student, while also providing support to that student and to the family. And finally, in not only in our work, but in your work, in the work of colleagues, administrators, fellow educators, we are not alone. There are multiple resources, there are multiple supports available to help parents and guardians and students to get support as they navigate not only the DDSB education system, but life itself. I should mention that in preparing for tonight, we connected with many 2S LGBTQIA+ students, parents, guardians, caregivers, and families, so as to reflect their authentic lived realities. And in fact, we did extend an invitation for some to attend tonight. Again, not about us, without us. They have politely declined to attend. And this does go back and speak to our first message about providing a safe space for everyone. We wanted to provide a safe space for these parents, guardians, caregivers to share their voice, and they do wish to have their voices heard. And if the pandemic has taught us anything, it's provided increased security for members of the 2S LGBTQIA+ to share their voices. But their own lived realities and their past experiences of trauma have shown them that when they share their voice publicly, it often does not go well. And this has resulted, of course, in a lack of trust. And this is a strong message in that we're not having anyone present tonight. It is difficult to assure those members that the spaces we're inviting them to are safe. And it's not meant as a personal statement about anyone present. It's not meant to offend. It is simply a statement of the lived reality of members of the 2S LGBTQIA+ community. Jill?
Yeah, thank you, James. So the next couple of slides, we do want to share some of that voice with you. And I've had, as James said as well, the absolute honor of speaking to many members of the 2S LGBTQIA+ community within Durham, students, caregivers, parents, family members, and to try and pull voice from specific voices from all of that was quite difficult. I could share all night with you, but I did come up with a few that I wanted to bring to the table tonight. So I don't need to read this slide to you. You can read them yourself. I'll just give you a moment to do that, but please know they are actual quotes and actual voices from our community. So our students, our families, our caregivers, we're all that one big family. So their voices actually from DDSB, and I really want you to sit with that and think about that as you're reading it, because these are people you could know. So I'll just give you a moment for that one, and then James, we can flip in a moment or two to the next slide when you think people are ready.
Already done.
Beautiful. Look at that. Look at you. So yeah, in each of the experiences that I did share, and like I said, this is just a snippet. There are many, many more. What people are left wondering are how welcome they truly are in school and in our communities. Many are left feeling invisible, invalidated, and othered. And so when asked what they felt schools and the school community could do to ensure a more positive dynamic, many of them mentioned ongoing professional development and training. That was like the number one thing that came forth. And in recognizing that not all people have had close interactions with out 2S LGBTQIA plus individuals, they believe that some simple background information might actually, and knowledge could be a good start and could go a long way. So that seemed to be the number one thing that came through it. And so these quotes, this information, this data, that is why we're doing this work. And as I said, I have many more quotes and data that I could share, but I just wanted to give you a snippet of it. So I'll pass it on to you, James.
Thanks, Jill. And this is where we were originally invited to answer the question, so how do we take action based on this parent guardian voice that you've just seen in the quotes before, and the voice that we've heard as Jill and I have talked to parents, guardians, and caregivers. And this is where Visible Everyday this is where the genesis of Visible Everyday came through. The Visible Everyday Committee in the DDSB was started in March of 2021 with the goal of providing the best possible supports for students, for staff, and for families who identify as part of the 2S LGBTQIA+ community. And we were doing this support through actions which support the efforts of the DDSB and the Equity and Inclusive Education Department. It should be mentioned that Visible Everyday itself is not an affinity network, and an affinity network is where members or allies of the community would meet for support and meet to discuss issues. It is a committee comprised of staff. So in the first few months, the Visible Everyday Committee developed a plan of action to celebrate and to support those who identify as part of the 2S LGBTQIA+ community within the DDSB. The committee gathered input and data from 3 main stakeholder groups: from students, from staff, and from families. And these voices, along with the voices of community partners who have historically supported the queer and trans communities, helped us to inform our work as system leaders and as educators, and ensured that the DDSB continues to grow as an organization that is safe and supportive and embraces all peoples. In January of 2022, so a few short months ago, a list of over 30 recommendations were presented to the senior administration of the DDSB, with several of those recommendations immediately being turned into actions. So several of those actions undertaken included an overview of internal DDSB resources, both document-based and human resources, because we as humans are resources as well. And these resources were to identify what has been done and what could be built upon in terms of supporting 2S LGBTQIA+ families and community. The other actions that were taken: a review of external resources, including community supports through PFLAG Durham, PFLAG standing for the Parents of Lesbians and Gays, Korea Community Health Center, Durham Alliance Outreach, Durham Queer Parenting, and ACDR, which stands for the AIDS Committee of Durham Region, to name just a few of the community supports. As well, there has been, through the DDSB and with the support of senior administration, the creation of a queer studies course at the secondary level, the high school level of education. Elementary and secondary administrators and staff have had presentations on supporting students and families who are transitioning. And there have been a great number of supports and development of GSA groups in virtual schools and in brick and mortar schools. And GSA standing for, in some schools, Gay Straight Alliance, in other schools, Gender and Sexuality Alliance. It's important to note that this work is absolutely not new. These concepts and ideas have been discussed in the past and have been discussed to greater length and to greater depth in the past. And will be continued to be reviewed, revised, and revisited in the future. In our research, there is actually a 2014 monograph that was published through the DDSB Parent Engagement Committee, which highlighted several of the issues upon which the Visible Everyday Committee is taking action. I'm going to put that link in the chat so you are able to share and access that. I hope it comes through well. And we're going to be speaking and highlighting some of those key pieces in the next couple slides. So ultimately, to wrap it all up, the Visible Everyday Committee itself is committed to taking the ideas that have been written on paper and undertaking actions to positively impact students, staff, parents, guardians, and caregivers and families. Jill?
Great, thanks, James. So as I mentioned before, leading off from the Visible Everyday Committee, we want to talk a little bit about specifically engaging families. What we don't want to do is give you a checklist: do this, do this, do this, because quite frankly, we can't. Every situation is different. As I said, we're not the experts, but what we can do is speak a little about a framework of connecting, engaging, and sustaining relationships with families that may help guide somewhat. So in understanding that engaging families in a meaningful way goes beyond school events and parent-teacher conferences, and family engagement requires parents, students, and staff to have clear expectations on how they're all involved in the student success in school. And as I say, we can do this through this Connect, Engage, Sustain framework. So on the next slide here, I've just put in, thanks, James, if you just go to the next one. Wonderful, thank you. So I just want to talk to you a little bit about each category in this framework. So first of all, how do we connect with our families? And some strategies for this include providing multiple means of communication between school and parents. So when we are communicating, think about how we're communicating. Are we reaching all our families? And if not, what can we do to ensure that we are reaching all our families and we're addressing the diversity of families out within the DDSB? Also emphasizing the important role families play in their child's social well-being and academic achievement. and create buy-in by educating our parents on how their involvement correlates to the student outcome, and link community and family engagement to student outcomes. Also focusing our efforts on relationship building between community leaders and school district staff. Acting as informational hubs for parents, educators and community partners and volunteers, and holding events that celebrate the diversity of your school district. So I know we have some administrators here this evening and some teachers. So just think about the events that you do have in your school. Do they truly celebrate the diversity of your school community? And I know we do a lot of cultural evenings and cultural events, but is that inclusive of all? And I'd like to suggest no, it's not. We're not there yet. So really put an emphasis on what those events could look like and how we can bring in a broader spectrum of families. And then moving on to the next category there, engage. So connecting with our parents, how are we and our families, how are we engaging them? So we can support parent and caregiver learning through workshops and classes, in this case around 2S LGBTQIA+ issues. For example, LGBTQ discrimination and bullying, protective factors for LGBTQ youth, coming out, laws and policies that protect our LGBTQ students. And that is something that as a system, as a district, we really need to move forward with, and making sure those protective factors are in place, those issues are being addressed, and that ongoing learning is happening. Also collaborating with outside community agencies to plan initiatives to engage our 2S LGBTQIA+ parents. And then making connections to local and online resources for families is also a big one. And I know, and I have to commend the board in the actions they've taken from our visible everyday recommendations. There's been a lot of outreach to different community services. So we really are, we're seeing big steps being taken, which is phenomenal. Also cultivating parental and familial leadership, the leadership pipeline. So identifying and working with families who want to serve as leaders within programs and within the larger community. Do we have representation, for example, on this committee? Do we know? If we don't know, well, we should know. So how can we engage and address that? How can we ensure this is a safe space for diverse families? And then encouraging parents and caregivers to join sexual health advisory committees, parent school community councils, and other decision-making groups. So they're just some of the ways in the framework that we can engage our parents and caregivers. And then how do we sustain that? Well, working with their busy schedules. I'm sure there are many parents out there, we're all very busy. Plan activities after rush hour, make workshop classes available online via webinar or live stream, and schedule multiple time slots if needed. Also providing incentives to parent engagement activities with food and childcare, which we can talk about with the upcoming event that we've got, and the pizza. I won't go too much into that, Margaret, but we're doing that. And building the capacity of our district and our schools by providing professional development opportunities around improving family involvement strategies. We'll go into a little bit more detail on the coming slides of some of these, specifically looking at cultivating inclusion, using inclusive language, providing windows and mirrors for families, addressing slurs and epithets that are aimed specifically at LGBTQIA+ families and students, and recognizing family diversity in school connections. So I think we can go on, yeah. And it's me again. So very quickly, so cultivating inclusion, really just to sum this up, it starts with taking a proactive approach to diversity, and it can be facilitated by creating a culture of acceptance and adding communications, as I said before, that support diverse worldviews and highlight different perspectives. Also conversations about identity and sexual orientation. We realize they may be uncomfortable, and people may not feel educated enough to have these conversations, but they really are so crucial, and creating space for those conversations allows unity to build and healing to happen. And then recognizing different family structures that make all feel welcome. And as I said before, most systems operate under heteronormative cultures, but schools actually are in a good position to change that and to modify their programming and their paperwork to allow families who identify in relation to their students. And I'm going to actually, I know I rushed through that, but I've been talking for a long time and I'm cognizant of time. So James, can I pass it over to you for the next one?
Absolutely, absolutely. I'll just switch the slides. So using inclusive language, you may have noticed that at the beginning in our introduction, the two of us and many other folk have begun introducing themselves with our pronouns. We're also adding pronouns to our email signatures. The question you may have is why? And there may be some curiosity about, what is this all about? When you need to know, when cisgender people do this, it normalizes not assuming another person's gender based on how they look. It's also a small thing we can do in the interest of allyship. And allyship is, as you know, is about service to others. And the 2S LGBTQIA+ community has specifically requested that aspiring allies make this effort. In other words, naming your pronouns, and note, I'm not saying preferred pronouns, as the word preferred or chosen pronouns or preferred name, that promotes a sense of whimsy, lack of seriousness. We've been informed that it's better to say new pronouns. So naming your pronouns is not considered virtue signaling. It's not, hey, look how woke I am, in a very performative way. Even though I am a performer, it's not virtue signaling. It's part and parcel of demonstrating allyship to the community. Another allyship construct, which you may have heard, and you may have heard us using today, is when welcoming students or welcoming people into a school or into a learning space or an interactive space, educators, staff, and the community are using the word folks, F-O-L-X, instead of guys, girls and boys, gentlemen, ladies. The inclusivity honors all the lived realities and avoids assumptions about gender. You should know allyship takes the form of verbal and paper forms, and you'll notice I'm not reading the points that are actually on the screen because I'm thinking you can all read. But we want to recognize, again, the use of new names and new pronouns, because the phrase chosen or preferred, again, is that sense of whimsy. However, in most instances, when it comes to gender pronouns, it is not a case of it's not a big deal. It is a big deal for students and for families and for community members where it is misused. Simply asking what are your pronouns or what is the name that you wish to go by often helps to smooth that. Using new names and new pronouns should also be reflected in paperwork, as Jill has mentioned earlier, and was seen in the quotes from the parents. And this, from an education standpoint, includes comments on report cards, mark updates, concert programs, seating plans, permission forms. You'll note that forms in the DDSB, again, another stride ahead, are avoiding asking for identifying the mother and identifying the father, but instead saying identify parent 1 and parent 2. Forms are avoiding these and other binary heteronormative structures. DDSB staff, as you're aware, have been made aware of this concept. Legal documents, however, like OSRs and the title name on a report card still carry the legal, the birth, the given name until the student or family undertakes an official name change. And you should know legal name changes can occur as early as age 15. Some diplomas and some certificates via consultation with students and families can have names changed on that. That is a process in which you'd engage with your administrator at your school. Jill.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me okay? I see I was cutting out a little bit.
It was kind of fading in and out. It sounded like you went into a seashell for a moment or two, but
oh.
I think you're okay.
Okay, I'm so sorry. So we are, okay, so yes, thank you. Providing windows and mirrors for families. I'm sure you've all heard of this, this before, so I won't spend too long on it. But really, a window as we know, offers a view into someone else's experience, whereby a mirror reflects your own identity. So when we think from the perspective of students, when they see others around them who they can relate to and who are valued in the world, then they feel that sense of belonging. And when they see themselves reflected in their community, in their school and in resources, they begin to have that confidence in their identity. And so putting up mirrors for our students merely means setting up the context for them. So it's very important that we consider that when we're looking at communication, events, the physical building of our schools, that our students do see themselves reflected. And then windows help us develop understanding about the wider world. So students and their families also need to learn about how other people conduct themselves in the world in order to understand how they might fit in. So with that in mind, and some of these may be a little bit repeated from before, but does our communication reflect the lives of our DDSB families? When we're putting out flyers for events, can our 2S LGBTQIA plus families, caregivers, students, guardians, can they see themselves in that communication? Do we promote perspectives on all families? Does our communication feature transgender and same-sex parents, two moms, two dads? Is that reflected in all of our communication? And do the images, as I said, we use include diversity? And there's some things, easy things that we can make happen. But again, we just wanted to bring them to the forefront. And James?
It's always good when you get the sign that says you're muted. Thanks, Jill. And I think it's worth noting at this point, and I can see Margaret smiling. Yeah, my turn to forget. I think it's worth noting at this point that we are very much talking to us LGBTQIA plus students, parents, community, allies, etc. But there are intersections that exist with other affinity groups within the board, with our Black families, with our racialized families, with our Indigenous families, with our families that struggle in socioeconomic circumstances, with our families that have students that are neurodiverse. Back in December of 2021, and I say back in, it's 4 or 5 months ago, Director Nora Marsh put out a letter to the DDSB about the use of slurs and epithets. And essentially, it indicated that the Durham District School Board was committed to creating environments for students and staff that are safe, welcoming, respectful, equitable, accessible, and inclusive, which goes right back to our human rights statement. To achieve this goal, the instruction was that each of us has a legal and ethical responsibility to treat absolutely everyone with respect and dignity, to uphold and protect Indigenous and human rights, and to actively prevent discrimination. For those reasons, the uttering, writing, or use of derogatory and pejorative slurs and epithets, including pictorial, physical representations, is prohibited within the workplace or the school community. Slurs and epithets, as you know, perpetuate historical and ongoing discrimination and trauma, resulting in negative impacts on mental health, on well-being, and on a sense of belonging for not only our students, but also for our parents, guardians, and caregivers. The use of slurs and epithets prevents students and staff from accessing their education and or workplace fully and is against the Human Rights Code. As a system, we're intentionally focusing our efforts to enhance learning about Indigenous and human rights to better understand how to create a truly inclusive system that is free from discrimination for all students and staff. So in terms of the intersection of addressing slurs and epithets with the 2S LGBTQIA plus community, I mentioned earlier the correct use of new name and new pronouns in our schools, again, feeds back to our key message of we are not here to out anyone and take the lead of the family. If new names and pronouns are to be used by students and by families in schools and classrooms, it is incumbent that family and staff work together to support this new lived reality. This includes plans for addressing incorrect name use and pronoun use by staff and students, which may require conversations and patience as staff and students acclimate to the new names and new pronouns. And on the topic of new names, again, my own lived experience with my own eldest child, It's very much a case where their name has changed several times. And over the course of supporting them and supporting their younger siblings who have just gotten used to one name and it changes to another, very much counseling patience and support as they work very hard to be their true and best selves. There are also one-liners which we have counseled with students and with families. For example, I use them pronouns, and that can be used not only by the students and the families, but by the allies who are supporting those students. The best way, and you'll note in the point it says staff and teachers interrupting teasing. The best way to interrupt teasing in the use of slurs and epithets, really, because that's what the teasing is to engage in proactive education with students. Staff and family are being supported through the DDSB to engage in proactive, robust conversations with all students about the spectrums of gender identity and being responsive to negative social media discourse that might worm its way into the classroom. Like there was a recent trend about saying super straight, and I know in mentioning colleague Richard from our Positive School Climate who had large conversations about that. And it's also a case of how to use those teachable moments, whether at school or whether at home, to have conversations about inclusion and to ultimately provide safe spaces for everyone. School staff, you'll be happy to know, are being provided with teaching and learning supports for inadvertent and for deliberate use of incorrect names and pronouns. And that support obviously includes referral and redirection to school administration, who can help, as we said at the beginning, with the learning and unlearning of some of these systems of oppression that we've dealt with. Jill?
Thanks, James. And yeah, the last one, recognizing family diversity in school connections. And as James says, this, this does include the intersectionality of our families as well. So just for consideration, are your events welcoming for all? Are all families treated with respect? And do you avoid any stereotyping or judgment when communicating with your families? Do your school events recognize and celebrate the wide diversity that we have, and are they welcoming for all? Do you know your school community? Does your calendar reflect all the important holidays and celebrations for all families? And are the resources and materials that are available and visible relevant, and do they serve the needs of the diverse families that we have in our schools? And can caregivers and family members and parents identify you as an ally? And with that being said, we thank you for listening. I feel like we brushed through things a little bit there, and I apologize for that. But I wanted to end with a quote here. And Margaret, I think we were in the same presentation with Principal Caffelli when he actually used this quote, but I really just wanted to put it up there because it spoke to me then, and I hope it speaks to you now. We really do need to meet people where they are and as they are. And if that is what we are doing, then we are doing it right. So with that, if you do have any questions, I'll default everything to James. No, I'm just joking. If you've got any questions, please go ahead.
Oh, and knowing too that we've done a large information. Sorry, Jim, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying I'm not seeing any questions coming, but go ahead, James.
Well, and I have a feeling when Jill and I were preparing this, it was, oh, there's so much we want to share, so much we want to laud about what the DDSB has done and what Visible Every Day has done to be able to support. It's very much a case of there's so much we could talk for hours, and you can tell we were trying to pare it down to 15, 20 minutes. So, oh, I'm seeing Ted, your hand is up.
Yep. First and foremost, that was amazing. Thank you very much. One of the things I came across in our family was the talk of pronouns, and now that I can see there's places we can go to fully understand what they mean, because all of a sudden they just started to appear, and there really was nowhere for us to go look and see exactly what it meant. And hopefully, I think there should be a lot of clarification for the them, they, because I've gotten personally confused with that when, picking my daughter up and she says, I said, oh, is so-and-so, do we need to give them a ride? And he says, no, their husband, their boyfriend's coming to pick them up. And I thought, oh, who else is with her? And that was a moment on my part. And she did explain to me all that now, but I'm very happy that there will be more resources for that, because I felt very bad for saying that, and learning going forward I think is going to be an excellent thing. So I'm glad there's resources for parents and guardians to go and look at this, because I think it's a very important topic. Very well done, thank you.
We have a question from Kristen. Actually, I apologize. A question from Margaret, and then on to Kristen.
So my question is, this is a parent group. How can we help with certainly what Ted was just referring to? How can we help our parents on this journey of recognizing, validating, and affirming all of our students, particularly our 2S LGBTQI that we're talking about tonight?
Jill, do you want me to, can I start?
Oh, sorry, yeah, please go ahead, James.
Okay? So, I mean, my first reaction would be to go back to the key messages we said, which is, I mean, take the lead of the student, but also in your work as the parent, as the guardian, as the caregiver, you're not alone in this. So do reach out and do communicate with the leaders in your schools, whether that be the classroom leader, whether that be the administrative leader. Communication is key. We also go back to, again, you're not alone in this. There are those, and I really like what Jill said earlier about the fact we are no way, shape, or form the experts on any of this. We have had possibly a couple of additional experiences beyond what some of the parents or guardians have experienced, but to know that you're not alone and know that there is help and support through your school and also through community agencies. And again, I will reference ACDR, I will reference PFLAG, who have provided a lot of information to be able to support parents, guardians, caregivers on supporting their child as they go through this journey. And there can be confusion on the part of the parents, guardians, and caregivers. There can be, in some cases, there can be some denial and some pushing away. And it's really important to remember that these are our kids, and that they are part of your families. They're part of our community, and they're important. They're the reason that we do what we do every day. Jill, I'll pass it over to you.
Yeah, thanks, James. I think you said that very well. Yeah, and I was just reflecting on I think Ted, what you'd said. If it's okay to just refer to that for a moment, about when they, and you thinking that they was plural and then feeling awful about it. And it's honestly it's learning, and everybody is learning. And I think the big message is, don't be afraid to start or to say something because you don't feel that you know enough. The first step is just to trying, and if you know you make an error, apologize and move on, and not, don't make a big deal of it. I'm so sorry. It's just like, oh, I do apologize, blah blah, I meant they, and then move on. And the other big thing, I know, James, you mentioned this, I just really want to emphasize it, is that it's not our job to out anybody or to share anybody's private personal information. If somebody comes to you, whether it be your own child, whether it be a student, and comes to you and discloses anything, we can't take that information anywhere without the permission of the child. And it doesn't matter if the child's in high school, grade 12, grade 3, it doesn't matter. We must, and I'll emphasize it again, we must take the lead of the child. In one of my own experiences, we had a younger child who was openly out in school, but not with their family. And we need to respect that. And navigating that can be tricky when you've got a minor involved, but again, we have to just follow their lead. So don't be afraid not to take action because you don't feel like you know enough. Apologize if you make a mistake and move on. And if anybody comes to you and discloses anything, it stays with you. Follow the child's lead, and if they say it's okay for you to share with ABC, then you can share with ABC. And I just want to, I know you said those things, James, I just want to reiterate that because it's so very important, and they're the most important things that you can do.
And I agree, Jill, and I'm going to add to that because you've sparked a memory for me in terms of, because these are kids, and and my eldest at this point is 19, so not technically a kid, but there is coaching that has to be undertaken. In terms of, yes, we want to take the lead of the child, but sometimes the child doesn't see the results of things. And my example would be when my eldest did declare that they were transitioning and that they were grabbing their new name and making use of that. There was the question about, okay, can we tell grandparents? Can we tell aunts and uncles? Can we tell close family friends? And they hadn't considered that because they were very focused on, well, this is me, this is the new me. And so it was very much a coaching, mentoring, okay, how do we now, again, you're not alone, we're not alone, how do we go through this? And I know for some parents, it can be tough because when your child is born, you choose that name, and that has an incredible amount of meaning for you and for the family. But the child does have the right to identify. And it may be a case of, okay, if that is not the name that best represents your lived reality, let's talk about how we can best support you.
And thank you, James. And if I can just add to that as well, it really is, and this is hard as I mean, I'm a parent myself. It's hard as a parent, but really, it's not about you. It's not about me. It's not about your comfort or discomfort. It's about the child, right? And so, James, absolutely, you're right. Coaching them. Can we tell ABC, what do you need? What, have you considered this or that? But again, it's not about us in any shape or form. It's about the child.
Exactly. I do have to mention one more thing. I do have permission from my eldest, by the way, because I've quoted them. And I have their permission to be able to speak to the journey that we're on. So which is also important. If I was speaking out of turn without their permission and they found out, that's an incredible invalidation of who they are. So just so the community here on the Zoom is aware.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And we have a follow-up question from Kristen.
Hi, thanks for that presentation. It was great. I have two quick questions. One, really glad to hear that a queer studies course has been put together. I'm assuming it's still kind of in a pilot project, but I'm wondering if that will be a virtual choice, or if or how you would pick which schools, and maybe that's like not decisions made yet. And then just another quick one. I noticed in my school's calendar that in June that there is a Pride event at the board headquarters, which again, awesome. And I know that they've had that in the past. I remember seeing it, but I'm wondering, is that open to all DDSB families, or is it for the community? Just in the sense of, again, I don't want to come to something if there are, like we had said, that people didn't want to come to this meeting because they didn't necessarily feel safe. So obviously those families, that event would be foremost for them. But again, if I'm an ally and I want my children to also experience that, is that something, or just wondering?
Yeah, sorry, I don't know if it was my connection or yours. It was cutting out a little bit there. But are you referring to the Durham Youth Pride event?
I believe it's the weekend, like the first weekend of June. So I thought it was a DDSB event, but maybe I'm wrong.
Right, there is one on June the 4th. It's the Durham Youth Pride event, and it's at the hangar, the aircraft hangar in Oshawa there. It's on a Saturday. It is open. Actually, the information will be going out to the community about that. So it is open to the community. So you're welcome to attend.
And I should add in there, thanks, Jill. So May 17th is the International Day Against Homophobia and Transphobia, which schools across the Durham District School Board will be flying the Pride flag. You should also know that June is Pride Month. So the flag actually goes up on the 17th and stays up until the end of June. Kristen, to go back to your question about the queer studies course being put together, I keep saying I'm the proud principal of Donna Leigh Wilson, and I truly am, because we are running a queer studies course next year. We have students who have signed up, who have chosen to do it. So it's when we're an in-person school. So it is happening in an in-person school because we've got the number of students who are interested and able to and are able to do the course itself, which is fantastic. And we have a curriculum that we can use for that, which the creation of the curriculum, again, kudos to the Durham District School Board. It has been created with the monetary and the time support of the DDSB. I think that answered your question, right? Awesome, thumbs up, thanks.
And we have a question from Leandra as well.
It's not a question, it was just what James was talking about for the queer studies course. I believe it may also be offered as a D2L, because there is a Black Studies course that we've created, and that should be coming out, will be coming out for 2022, 2023. So the Black Studies course is a D2L, which is an online, but as James says, the queer studies will be in person. Not sure if we'll be able to offer it to D2L because we do want to ensure that all students have the opportunity to have access to that course. So I can get back to you on whether or not that is going to be offered as a D2L online learning as well. But it's wonderful news. I believe they're like heavily into the course and getting that ready to go. So stay tuned for that. It's exciting.
Perfect, thank you. I'd like to thank Jill and James for a great presentation. We had a very great, thorough discussion. We'll now move on our agenda to the school cash discussion with Ted Foster and Margaret Lazarus.
Okay. All right, I'll let Ted start. He's our parent. This is the parent committee, so let Ted take it away and I'll add what is missing. But I will start by saying that we did meet with our financial people at the board office, Wendy McPherson and Michelle Duard, and had a very fulsome conversation with them. And I'll let James just report to a few things. Ted, sorry.
Yes, that's okay. Just don't call me late for dinner. Yes, as Margaret said, Margaret and I met April 27th just to discuss further school cash online, which is the tool that DDSB uses so that parents don't have to send in cash and or checks to the school to pay for fundraising things as well as school activities that go on. And we did meet with, as she said, with two staff from the finance area last week to discuss just some issues. I guess just to remind everybody, the school cash online was brought in about 5 years ago to alleviate having teachers and school staff collect cash and checks from our kids for for a variety of things. And I think it worked out very well. The company they picked was excellent, but it was this year that it was noticed at the beginning of the school year that some fees started to appear, and the fees were, historically in the past 5 years, were covered by the DDSB. And it's not the software fee that I'm referring to, because that's just, if they're going to pay for the software fee, that's the board's cost. It was the transactional fees. So there was some transaction fees that the board was covering during that time, and that was mostly to encourage all our parents to enroll in it, to get, to buy into the cashless thought. But what had happened is, and Margaret had a parent contact her, and I guess I had contacted some of, like, my superintendent in Pickering, and just started to talk about, I've noticed this fee there, and this fee was never really Where was it in prior years? How come we're paying for it now? And there appears to be an escalation. So the higher the cost, like if you're putting in for a $25 fee for t-shirts or something, it was like a $250 cost. And as it's, the cost went up for, like I'll say, thank God, for the semi-formal we're having this year in grade 12s. I mean, now it was like $350. And then in fundraising events, it could be almost to $450 and higher. So the question I guess Margaret and I wanted to talk to the board staff was, well, when was this communicated? Because it seemed to be a surprise, at least to the parent community, that all of a sudden fees were coming. So the board staff did indicate to us that they did not communicate this globally to the parent community. However, they did discuss this with the administrators. So most principals, vice principals, admin were aware that this cost was there now, and that they were to, if they could, eat it up locally at their thing, if they had the budget for it, or the school non-board funds that they might have, to be able to eat this up. And then for SCCs, more in elementary than secondary, for their fundraising, whether they would be able to, to eat this cost or just pass it on to the parents. So Margaret and I asked them, okay, so if this is coming on this year, what kind of costs over the term of this has it been? And they did get back to us to advise us that in the initial years, pardon me, there was about $15,000 in fees that the board absorbed while the parents were getting onto this. And as of 18-19, it jumped almost 170,000 that the board absorbed. And that's fantastic, because that just shows that there's a lot of, excuse me, pardon me, uptake by our parent committee to use this. So it is a good thing. It's just this cost that has started to come around. And as parents notice this and start talking about it, the problem is that, some schools just may not, find that they cannot do this. And we just want to somehow talk to the board about, taking up these fees again and not passing them on to the parents, because this whole tool is to help both the parent and the DDSB. So I think, Margaret, I think that's all.
Yeah,
The software itself is very good. It's probably leading in industry and in public sector. It's just the fact that there was nothing to the parents to tell us that this was coming, and that maybe what we could do as a parent committee, just go back to the board and say, please eat these costs up again. However, or because there's got to be funds somewhere that we could do that. Is Scott still here? There's got to be some way we can do this, because I don't want to see our parents say, I don't want to fundraise for my child. And this, by the way, this money that we were talking about, this like in 18-19, this $170,000, it did go back to the software company. So it's not something the board is taking to fund other items. It's actually going right back to the software company. So Margaret, did I miss?
No, just in addition, we had also asked when the contract expires in 2025. So it's certainly we have it for another 3 years. And so it's how are we going to make this work for the parents? But certainly, what is your will and pleasure from this committee? What would you like us to do with the information that we've just presented to you? Any thoughts? Kristen.
Hopefully I won't cut out. Has there actually been, have schools contacted and said this, we can't afford this? I'm thinking could there almost be not like a bursary, but we all know that there are priority schools and have-not schools. And I come from an area that, we don't do a lot of fundraising, and even getting families to use the cash online was a bit of a feat. So I'm just wondering, maybe some of the schools who are making lots of money, or it doesn't seem to be a problem, can they absorb some of it more? Like, I hate to say that, but like, I don't want it to look like charity, but
Yeah.
maybe it's something we could apply for. Like, hey, if you're having difficulties with this, there might be a fund at the board that those particular schools could, like, you know, write a little email or send a little form that, yeah, we would love relief, maybe a little relief from the fund. And some schools might not need it, but some schools would. And if that would keep kind of everybody a little bit even, or, you know, and equitable, I would, you know, maybe something to that effect.
Okay. They did say that schools certainly are responsible for organizing and supporting the fundraising activities, and they thought that schools, and you're right, Kristen, some schools do raise more money than others and can sort of probably absorb those costs, and there are some schools that can't. So certainly they did, that was one of their last things at schools, and because not all schools fundraise, not all schools are having problems, but I like your suggestion of certainly the weaker ones, the ones who are having difficulties, if there's something that we can do for them. So we'll have to look into that and see if there is anything that the board can do for these schools. Ted.
Sorry, just to be clear too, this is not just fundraising. This is a cost, and this is why I talked about in public school. Generally, it probably is a little more fundraising because it's they do a lot more of that, pizza lunches, that type of thing. But when you get into secondary, there really is no fundraising that's happening. So everything that's going through Cash Online is either a DDSB directed thing for student cards and or school activities, for T-shirts, for I would say field trips whenever those start up again. But it's not just a fundraising thing. It's a tool that the parents can use to pay for fundraising, or also pay, in my case, you know, for semi-formal, and also for graduation and for yearbook. And so it's not really just specifically fundraising, but there's other activities that go on. And as I said, I would hate, you know, for, you know, people just to start writing checks again or sending in money with their kids, because that defeats the whole purpose.
Any other thoughts before I pass it back to our chairs? Okay, so I'm thinking that we're going to take a recommendation. Certainly, we'll go back to the board and see if they can cover the fees, or at least if they can help schools that are struggling with these fees. We can ask about that and then see where we go from there. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ted and Margaret, for the great presentation, everybody for your questions. We'll be moving on to updates from the parent involvement subcommittees. First up, we'll have the Parent Engagement Series, who recently just had their session with Dr. John Duffy.
That could be me. First of all, thank you very much to everybody who joined our session. We had just over 1,300 people register, which was incredible. As it turned out, at the height of the evening, there were about 525 people who were in the session. But what's important for me is not that that's about, you know, just over a third of, no, sorry, my math's terrible, probably 60% of the people who registered. What's very important is that the number of people who joined the session and the number of people who ended the session was more or less the same, which means that our speaker, Dr. Duffy, engaged, let's say, 480 people for an hour and a half with no PowerPoint, just himself speaking. There were over 130 questions that were raised, and I could have asked Dr. Duffy questions the whole night. I think I stopped after about half an hour. On our side, it was very well received, and of the, say, 480 people who were there, more than 200 completed the survey within about 20 minutes of the session ending, giving us an average score of 4.75 out of 5. We have drawn 50 winners of Dr. Duffy's book, And my thanks to Margaret and Manon. Margaret for allowing us to buy that number of copies. And Manon is in the process of sending those copies through DDSB mail or to people's houses if people who registered were not DDSB parents. And that came about because one of our most successful ways of promoting the evening was Facebook. And Facebook's instruction was to target all families in Durham with teenagers. So we're now analyzing the results of who saw the event where. Our communications team is helping us with that, and that will give us some really good data for next year. On my side, I really want to thank everybody involved with it. It was a pleasure to organize, and I think it was a very good evening. And I would be remiss if I didn't add that in addition to everything else, we were fortunate to engage the services of 2 ASL American Sign Language interpreters or translators, Chris and Joanne. They would switch off every 15 minutes. It was absolutely amazing to watch. And I think that was a first for our board and hopefully not a last. So once again, thank you very much, everybody. And Margaret, if you'd like me to take questions, if any come up, I'll stay on for a bit. Otherwise, I'm only allowed to show my face online for about 20 minutes an evening.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have any questions for Frank? Just checking here, Frank, 1 second. I don't see any at this time, but thank you very much. I was fortunate enough to see the entire session. It was a great night. Now we'll move on for updates from our PIC newsletter team, please.
I can add a little bit something about the newsletter. It was sent to all SCC chairs and the head secretaries on May 4th. And it's beautiful, by the way. And to the all administrators by May 9th. And it's been posted on our DDSB website. So if someone wants to have a look at it, and I believe I share the newsletters with all of you. And so if you have any questions regarding the newsletter, just let me know.
And I'm sorry, Margaret, if I may, I think it might be me also. I was a little bit involved with that. One of the best things was that the newsletter came out in time to promote our own evening and our own events, the speaker series and the Durham Partners virtual conference. And I think that's something we should strive for next year, to make sure that our newsletters are timed around the year's events, which always look good in the rearview mirror, but are harder to plan. And I'd like to congratulate Jolene Hart of our creative services and her team. I'm remiss, I can't remember the name of the person.
Monica.
Oh, thank you,
Monica.
Margaret. I think they did an absolutely superb job of the design, and our communications team gave it some tweaks, which made it even better. It was an exciting newsletter to look at. And once again, thank you.
Perfect. So we will move on now to our Durham Partners Conference. Somebody can speak to that about the upcoming event on May 17th, please.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jim. I can take that one on. Before I start, I have to say it's an absolute honor and a privilege to work with the Durham Partners Conference team. For those of you, and most of you are on it, I'll be honest, but for those of you who might not be on the team, it is a group of parents, guardians, and educators who have donated their time, their talent, their energy, their creativity to create and present a fantastic event in support of building positive relationships for students and families. At this point, with a lot of help from so many people, we have almost 1,000 registrations with about 6 days remaining. Not all of them are accessing free pizza. I just saw Margaret's head go up, and all of them? No, not all, but still a great cohort. We undertook a dress rehearsal on Tuesday evening, which went very well. We're feeling very confident, and we're in great anticipation of a fantastic show that's going to come up. Frank reminded me, we also have leveraged Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and at this point, we've got 30,000 plus hits and shares, which is an absolutely phenomenal response. If you or people you know still want to register, please do. The registration link will be up and open until we actually start the conference on Tuesday night at 6 o'clock. But the free pizza option has been shut down because we needed to get those orders out to Pizza and to the halal people. I need to do a shout out to Frank Samuels for his great work in not only being inclusive with the number of pizza options, but also in supporting our 70 plus halal families with meal options as well. So it's great. And a final massive shout out of appreciation always to Manon, but also to Margaret for her support and her patience with our creative team. We've I don't want to say we've tried her patience, but we've thrown some curveballs at her, and Margaret, your support is always appreciated. So thank you.
No problem.
Perfect. Thank you, James. And now we'll move on to our program applications team for an update, please.
Okay, hello, everybody. My name is Sarah Katab, and I'm currently leading the program team. So far, successful recipients of the program are working on their expenditures report, and the date of completion to submit the final report on the Google form, as well as all receipts and expenditures, is June the 10th. The final report will be shared on Friday, June 17th.
Nice.
And that's it for me.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And now we'll move on to our next piece of the agenda, which is the parent-friendly version of the human rights policy.
Yeah, so I just want to keep the human rights policy top of mind. It will be going to board on Monday, I think, Scott. And so we know that once it's passed, keeping our fingers crossed that it will be passed, then what our job as a team, and it's probably not for this year, but certainly for next year, is to create a friendly version for our parents so they can access the human rights policy and know what it means for them and their children. And so that's one of our jobs for next year is to create, and with the help of Devika Mether, who's the Human Rights and Equity Advisor, to create that version for our parents so that they know exactly what their rights are and what the rights of their children are, and they can access that document to the best of their abilities, of course. So that's my report for that. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Margaret. And now we're going to move on to number 7 on our agenda, updating of the SCC handbook. And our fellow co-chair, Uma, is going to lead off on this.
Good evening, everyone. So Manon was able to send out the SCC handbook that we have currently with our agenda today. I hope everyone had a chance to take a look at it. I know it is quite extensive, but everything that we need to run an SCC or to learn about how to run an SCC and get involved, etc., is in there. How would we like to move forward? Would anyone like to share their thoughts or questions in regards to what they read?
So one of the things that we, Manon, I don't know if my camera is always going off. One of the things that Manon and I noticed was that there was a greeting from Michael Barrett. Michael Barrett hasn't been chair of the board. I think he wasn't the chair of the board for at least over a year or 2 years. And so it's in 2 years. So it's important that that page be updated with the current chair that we have at our board. So that's one page I think that needs to be done. And Manon talked also about the forms that we have. What we'd like to do with that is certainly to make them fillable, to make them more accessible to our SEC leaders in their schools, so that it's they can be done online and they can be sent online, so that they don't have to print it and then access it that way. So that's one of the 2 changes that we saw. And if you see any of the changes, please let us know, because we really want to get these done as quickly as possible so that we can have that for our parents when they start in the fall with their SCC. Leandra.
I was just thinking of our human rights policy and how that is going to hopefully pass. And looking at things from a human rights lens in terms of the roles and responsibilities and guidelines. So I don't know if that's feasible within, the short time frame we have from now until June. However, I think it would be wise to look at our human rights policy and procedure in terms of our duty bearer responsibilities, which includes any involvement, parents involved with our students and with our schools, and perhaps make some revisions or adjustments based on our duty bearer responsibilities.
And for those who are not familiar with the duty bearer responsibilities, really to identify harm, to prevent harm, and to make sure that our schools are welcoming and safe environments for all students. And just to make sure that in our policy that is indicated in there. We are currently reviewing our SEC policy and our parent involvement policy. It has gone to our policy analyst, and it certainly will also go to Devika Mathur, who's our human rights an equity advisor, and he will also look over that policy to make sure that it is in compliance with our draft human rights policy. It's not passed yet, but we've got to wait till that passes before we can infuse it with that lens.
Thanks, Margaret.
Yeah.
Perfect. I've also see a question from Ted.
Okay, unmute. Margaret, maybe we can ask the board if they could, they talk about, I forget what page it's on, 30, about charitable donations. The $50 is really an arbitrary figure. It says under the Income Tax Act, which, you can issue tax receipts for $25, for $10. So there really is no limit for it. So whether we would get more, for the parents that don't want to actually do fundraising, that if they wrote a check for $10, that at least we would give them a tax receipt. So I know it really isn't true that $50 under the Income Tax Act. So it's maybe something we could look at that. The other thing is 64 pages. It's a daunting document, and I know we'd had some discussions about maybe next year getting some kind of session together for parents to say, what is the SEC? How do we become this? And when you come in and you get a 64-page document, my eyes would bulge. And as you flip through, maybe we counter it to elementary versus secondary, because some of the stuff that we talk about, financing and banking and bookkeeping, is very, very relevant for elementary, but not very relevant for secondary, because there isn't a lot that goes on there, or at least we're not aware of it. So that's why I was, thinking maybe there's some changes we can make there. But if we can pare down the document to not make it so it's enormous. I don't know how we not cut things out, but just, how can we make it a more friendlier document? So it's not quite like a board report, but it creeps there with 64 pages. So, and yeah, it's just relook it again. Some of the cartoons are interesting. Maybe we have a look at that. Anyway, that's kind of the thing.
I like what Leandra says, perhaps creating a what you really need to know infographic, like a one-pager for SEC, so they can just pull out when they need it and not have to try looking through the document to find it. I like that idea. It's a great idea. Leandra?
Sorry, I was also, oops. Sorry, I was also thinking even for de-streaming, we had to create, I had created a what parents need to know about de-streaming. So it was like a 2 or 3 pager versus everything else. It was more parent friendly in terms of lingo. Another idea is potentially doing like a this is another idea that we've come up with for the human rights policy for teachers in the classroom. We'd like to create something like a flip chart, something that is accessible, can sit on your desk, you can put it on your wall, and you can flip. And the key components of every area, it's just, I think, more accessible and less daunting than a 64-page document, where again, we kind of make things more concise in terms of what they really need to know, and it's a flip chart. So that's another possibility that we could potentially create.
That's really, and the operative word is to make sure that it's parent friendly, because everyone's right, it is a long document, and so that we can pare it down. Looks like it's work into the fall. Ted, and then we'll move on because we've got about 5 more minutes.
Sorry. Again, page 61, as we go through it, just updating lingo because it talks about regional SEC meetings, parent involved committee, which is still there, and then parents as partner symposium. That's I know we've rebranded a lot of that now, and that would be, you know, just I guess generally just go through the document and update all the terminologies.
Perfect. Thank you, everybody. And now we'd like to move on to updating the SCC video on the parent engagement webpage. And that's going to be led off by Uma as well.
So there was a video that was also sent out by Manon with the agenda and the minutes. And I was wondering, it's very short, and I was wondering if anyone had a chance to see the video. It's less than a minute, and if there's any thoughts or suggestions as to how the video can be improved moving forward. Go ahead, Ted.
Sorry, I saw it. Yeah, I think it needs updating.
Yes.
The introduction is done by Heather Mundy, who was 3 superintendents ago on that. And the topics are all very good as well, but I also suggested that I have to be careful when I say this, you know, just a representation of all our parents talking, because I noticed there was a lot of ladies, and I know there's got to be a guardian, father, dad, grandfather who would love to talk about this as well, get involved. So I want to be sensitive about it, but I think it needs to be updated that way. So we really show our parent community.
Just to give a little background, sorry, just for that particular video, it was taken at an event, and it was an open, you know, like parents could come in, and if they chose, they could be part of the video. So it wasn't open to all attendants there, and it wasn't intentionally discriminating or being exclusive.
So one thing we could do, and we've got Jonathan, I'm not asking Jonathan to come on, but they're a video team, and we can certainly engage them to do something that's more intentional and purposeful for a video. These are all things that I'm looking at early fall, although our SEC doesn't really get going until mid-October, but certainly we can try to get these things started now, and then get it going as quickly as possible. What I will do, and we don't know who's going to be on the committee next year, but some of you can repeat, and others you may. Actually, this is a fairly new committee this year. But anyways, what I can do is send an email out with the different areas, and you can sign up to what you'd like to do, and then we can go from there and see where we're at, and then get some meetings together and start working that. We're not working over the summer, no, but we can certainly put our thinking caps on now, so that when we hit the ground running, we can hit the ground running in October and get these things out as quickly as possible. Okay, that's
perfect.
Yeah, right there.
Thank you, everybody. I guess we're not working over the summer. I guess I'll make plans. No kidding. All right, so let's move on to our Parent Involvement Committee end of the year report.
Okay, that's me. So we have a year at the end of the year report that was also sent out in with the minutes, and it's an infographic, and involved in that report is Uma and Jim Allen, who will be making a presentation to our board about that. And so we just wanted to make you aware of some of the things that was on last year. And we've done most of what's been on there. We can certainly speak to a lot of those issues. I think we've got some really good data that we can put on the infographic. And so Manon and I, we're going to start looking at that and changing it, and we will send it out to you so you can give your feedback and add some additional information, because we had lots of information, lots of data from our parent series last Thursday. And one thing I loved about that was the data we collected from our parents. The comments was so encouraging, and it was overwhelmingly well received. And so we're going to be in the process of just compiling that, and then we'll send it out to this team, and you can give your feedback, and then we'll finalize it with our creative services. And then of course we'll work with Uma and Jim to get the report ready for this committee as well. And we'll send that out as well for this committee to get their feedback also. If there's anything else, if you look at that infographic, if there's something you think that's missing that we need to include on that, please be sure to let us know, and we'll be sure to include it as well. Any questions, any thoughts, ideas? Jonathan says, when we make videos in a more regular fashion, we do ensure representation. Thank you, Jonathan. Is at the forefront of the creation process. Excellent. So Jonathan, we're going to be engaging you right off the ball in mid-October when we get this committee going again. And hopefully we can get something out as quickly as possible so that we can put it on the website. And next year we can look at the website, how to make that website more parent-friendly and more informative for our parents, so that they can go there to get information, and not just about the Parent Involvement Committee, but information that they can access about other things as well. Ted.
Sorry, Margaret, just to talk about volunteer of distinction. I know it's been odd for the past few years. Do you think we'll be getting direction from the board on will there be an event this year? I know some criteria, because I remember last year when we were discussing at our high school about parent the volunteer distinction. It's really tough trying to figure out through everything that's gone on how to pick a volunteer of distinction. And 131 seems a little light, because I remember there used to be at least one for every school.
Yes. So because of COVID this year, we've already sent out a survey to our schools and to find out who has a volunteer that they could nominate. And we only came back with about 30, mid-30s. So chances are that we will not be hosting it, but certainly have to take that to our senior team and to discuss it. But really we have to have representation from the majority of schools, and 30 is just not a majority. But we're hoping that if not this year, for sure next year, we're going to plan that we can have our volunteer distinction event again, because it's really an amazing evening just to validate the work that our volunteers do in our school to help us run the programs that we run, to keep our and that partnership with parents as well in the community is it's just really nice to validate that and to see that, and to give them the due that they deserve. Yes,
Margaret. So was that sent out to the administration of our schools?
Was sent out to the administration of all of our schools.
Oh, okay, because just as an FYI, we heard nothing about it. So whether it's something we want to take a final sweep through in May to see if there's because there are SEC meetings that didn't happen in March and maybe in April. Now they're getting back into closing up the year, and that's not a discussion we wouldn't have till, at least at our school, till the end of May, early June.
Okay. So we can send that out again, and to our SEC chairs, just to do that final sweep. And then we will certainly have a conversation around our admin council table and make a decision about whether we are going to be having a public award ceremony for volunteers.
Excellent, thank you.
Lots of work ahead of us. This is officially our last meeting for the year. It feels like, because of all the work that we have ahead of us, it seems like, oh, we shouldn't be starting, we should be continuing with our meetings, but nonetheless, we had said 4 meetings for the year, and it is our last meeting. I just want to thank every single person on this committee for the commitment, that you have put into being a part of this Parent Involvement Committee. We couldn't do the work without you, just like as SCC as a principal, we could not do the work in our schools without our parent volunteers. So we're just grateful and thankful. And we will be communicating with you towards the end of the year now, between now and the end of June, for information feedback. You give feedback as if you don't feel obligated to give it, but we do seek it. And so that we can make sure that the report we're giving at the end of the last board meeting in June, that it's fulsome and represents the work that we have done this year. We got off to a late start. And so next year we will certainly hit the ground running mid-October, early October, so that we can pack in as much as we can for our parents and for our students. So thank you so much. Thank you to Uma and Jim. Your work is not done, but we're just grateful that you have agreed to be the chair for this year. So we're grateful for that. So thank you so much, everyone, and keep in touch.
Thank you, everybody.
Good night.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.
Thank you.